everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the People's Perspective on Development podcast, where we're going to explore topics around urban planning, community development, and of course, for this segment, it is about public space and public life. I'm your host, Tunisia, and today we're going to have a discussion on the interpretations about what is public space, what is public life, and how do people function in between that. So today, our segment is about let's hear from the people. For this, I actually prepared a questionnaire that I shared and discussed along the lines with different people from different backgrounds. And today we're going to get Bayiti's input, who was with us in our previous episode about Let's Hear from a Professional. Bayiti, welcome back. We're excited to have you here with us. And I'm just going to quickly take you through the questions that I shared with these individuals, and we'll get your input from there. First question that we went through was about where do these people live? Secondly, where do they work? And then we had asked them to describe the places and spaces that they pass through during their daily commute to and from work. What does it look like? What are the roads like? What are the spaces in terms of public space, in terms of parks and recreation available to them? And are these areas maintained? Are there shopping centers? Are there community facilities? What is available in these various areas? Then we had asked, how do you place the feeling that these people experience in these areas? And lastly, what would they want to change in this in-between space? All right, guys. So our first, are they a listener? First interviewee?
Our first input.
Okay. Our first input is going to come from Kelsey, who is a student, and she describes her experience traveling to and from home. And her focus strategy by ET was about the beautification of these areas in between highways, in between roads. And do you think, as planners, we actually consider this a top priority for public space?
Hey, Tina, howdy doody. Hope I'm not too late. So where do I live? Physical address, 22 Korea Street, Amandasig, Acacia. Where do you work? I currently study at Onderstepoort campus. Describe the places you pass your daily commute from where you live to work. So I go on the highway, on the R80 towards Onderstepoort, or I go through town, which is Pretoria North, and then that's a residential area. Describe the place. Yeah, the highway is just a long freeway road with like a few signs, I guess. And they are doing roadworks on the highway, so that's a bit of an inconvenience, whereas the roads in town deserve more roadworks to be done on them because there's more potholes on the residential through town, whereas the highway, I think the roads are fine, and that's just causing so much more unnecessary drama for the people. What does it look like? The highway is literally just grass and few signs, but it's different types of grass, which is interesting. Like it's pretty grass when they show their inflorescence, so that's quite nice. It's interesting to see different types of grasses. Polluted, congested through town, Pretoria North. It's not really polluted through Pretoria North. There's even a sign that says, help us keep Pretoria North great, which is quite nice. So you can see the people in Pretoria North area actually do care about their town, suburb, place they live. But yeah, some of the roads terrible through town. So like the buildings itself, they're fine. Like they maintain them quite well, but the roads especially not well at all. How do the places you describe above make you feel? Do you enjoy going out to places? Oh, wait, where you want to? Where you live? Okay. Like I enjoy the highway when there's no roadworks because it's just a long drive, and straight roads. That's all right driving there. Through town, I guess I do sometimes enjoy driving through town because I like waving at the people. Yeah. What would you want to change about this in between space? I guess more flowers planted on the side of the highway. This is probably sounds ridiculous, but that would be pretty to look at amongst the different species of grass, and literally just fix the roads in town. That's all I can suggest, because the buildings and stuff, you can see it's well maintained. What do you think public life and public space is? It's a space where lots of people share. So it's communal. Yeah, different types of people go there and do, yeah, they do stuff there together. So, yeah, you have to really be considerate because other people will be using that, and it's a oftenly used space. So it needs to be well maintained. So, yeah, hygiene is very important there, and just make it look pretty because, I mean, people go there often, so you'd want to afford more attention, to put more attention to those places. Yeah, I hope this helped.
So I've always believed that beautification is at the core of a lot of how you get people to buy into a concept.
All right.
Marketing is the greatest science of them all.
Mm-hmm.
How you package something is everything more than the content itself. So a city with beautiful parks, well-maintained roads, some street furniture, statues always leaves a mark in your mind. Example, Century City.
Yes.
Umhlanga and KZN.
Yes.
In Joburg, we have the notorious Sandton City with all the
Definitely.
skyscrapers. All those
Yes.
are part of creating an identity for an area.
When we're considering how do we design for people, I think this is a very, very important input from Kelsey herself, is that what do I look through the window and see when I'm traveling? What is in passing? And the fact that this creates a mood for how we leave our homes to how we're going to arrive at work. And this is often overlooked as we are faced with this challenge of development in terms of service delivery.
Yeah.
And this was a great input to receive, because at the end of the day, how the aesthetic is viewed by the user of the space is ultimately what will keep them going back to the space.
That's the most important factor. We're creating spaces for people with their collaboration.
All right, guys. Now we've got KG up, who is a cyclist, and he's going to share his experience to and from work.
Hello, T. I live currently in Centurion, and I work in Centurion. So I would describe the places I pass through on my daily commute from work and where I stay. I'd describe them as not beautiful, but it's normal. At least it's green, you know. There's a bit of traffic from time to time, although the traffic is not that long, and it looks green for the most part. I just like the fact that it looks green. There's a lot of trees around, so yeah, that's how I would describe it. I'm not sure if I should go more in depth, but there's not much really to it. I just pass a few industrial. Yeah, so the roads are okay. They're fairly okay. There aren't potholes on my way to work and back. It's well taken care of. And I did mention earlier that the road I travel through is mainly industrial. That's the structures. It's actually around those truck industrial storage places. We buy cars there at Goldswagen, whatever, auto parts. So I pass through there before I get to work. And okay, now I'm gonna jump to, I'm still at number 3. After talking about the roads, is there services and shopping malls? Yes, there are services and shopping malls. There are probably I can probably on my way to work and back, or even where I stay, I can count maybe an average of 5 options. I can go to maybe 5 different options. They're all accessible, and they it's more of shopping centers. The malls are a bit further. I think malls are your Centurion Mall, your Mall at Ritz, Irene, Village Mall. But yeah, the shopping centers are they're fairly a lot. They look good. They're well kept as well, and they're inviting. Um, okay, I'm gonna go now to number 4. How do the places you describe above make you feel? They make me feel okay. Yeah, they make me feel. That's a that's a bad answer. They make me feel, I think, good in terms of the options I have, and the type of stores that they are offered in those complexes and services. Actually, I didn't speak more on services. Um, by services, I think maybe I'm not sure if you're referring to, as in like your electricity, your water, your the typical municipal services type of services. So there are like lights. Sometimes they don't switch on, like street lights. That makes me feel a bit anxious when I'm driving at night. Um, there is water. The water's okay. Yeah, it's okay, but I think ever since the city of Tshwane, or not even ever since the cholera incident, we just try to stick away from drinking municipal water, because if a government is failing to keep up the electricity, you can imagine probably how maybe they would be neglecting the water, and that's something you put in your body. So I'm so conscious that I don't drink municipal water. That's the other service. The other services is the rubbish collection. That is offered. It is efficient, or because it comes once a week, so it does. It's a good service in my account. Okay, so yeah, I don't want this to be a very long voice note. I'm gonna jump to: do you enjoy going out to places around where you live? Yes, I do. I do enjoy going to these places, except that you kind of like need a car to go to these places. Um, it's not, I have a bicycle. I will try and go with a bicycle sometimes, but it's not safe. There aren't designated lanes for that, or there's not enough road reserve space for you to. So sometimes, if you're cycling to such places and back, you kind of have to be cautious and just hope or pray that whoever's driving or is gonna come by is also aware of you. So like, just dress like bright colors. Walking is not an option, because these places are far in terms of walking distance. They are not within 100 kilometers, or even, not 100 meters. I mean, I don't even think it's not even in 200 kilometers. Maybe they're around maybe 500 meters away, or along that figure. Besides going out to these places, there aren't particularly that much variety of like going out. We usually go to the same spaces, and there isn't a variety for other places where you can just casually go and just work from there, from the whole day, where you can get your coffees and whatever. And sometimes a mall is not as inviting, parking your car there and having to pay like large parking fees. Okay, what would you want to change I'm on question number 5 now. What would you want to change about this in between space? Okay. So the place in between where I live and where I work, or between these shopping malls, and what I would change about that is for them to be more, for them to be, I think maybe because some of the places in between the work and where I stay are undeveloped, so it's kind of a felt. So I'd like them to keep it neat so that no one can hide in there, so it makes us feel safer, especially at night. I would love for the street lights to work always. Like, I understand when there's load shedding if they're off, but if there isn't load shedding, I'd like that efficiency of the competence, from municipality to at least regularly change them if the globes maybe are fried. Okay. And another thing is that for them to be more, I think because I'm a town planner, obviously I understand a few other things about spaces, but as a pedestrian, these long blocks or these long estates with high walls, it particularly makes you kind of feel like you're closed in when you're walking, or also for pedestrians, that, if kind of like people are walking towards you or whatever, and they're about to mug you or whatever, there's literally nowhere for you to run to. So that's something, I guess, I would like it to change in terms of maybe visibility, or maybe, they don't have to be walls, but can it be like see through? Can they kind of like, be visible? Because I think it encourages crime. Or another thing I want is just more trees, man. Let's plant more trees for shade, and more space for like pedestrians in terms of sidewalks or cyclists. Just a bit more space for the pedestrian, because they're not taken into account as much. Okay, this voice note is running at 10 minutes now. I'm sorry, T. But now I'm at the last question. What do you think public life and public space is? Yeah, I think public life is maybe the ability of someone to experience life in public areas, because life has so many facets, to exercise, the ability for someone to exercise in public. The word public sounds free, like it should be for everyone and at no charge. So in terms of like what I was saying about life has so many facets, like exercise in public, eat in public, study in public, could name a few other things, but take a walk in public, take work in public, so that's what I understand about, or what I think public life is, and what public space I could go on and on about this one. But I think public space is it should be open to spaces that should be open to the public to use, to enjoy, to thrive in, sense of like immediately when I think of, let's say, a public space, it's a space where the public doesn't have to really rent or whatever, or pay a hefty fee to use, for the same thing I was saying, play, in like parks. I'd see a public space as a park, as a courtyard, at a mall, somewhere where people can also relax, where things can happen, where people can host the events, the exhibitions, a place where people can get together that requires no entrance fee or no that doesn't judge or require you to be from anywhere or any public space. That's what I understand from it.
As you could tell from that segment, the element of safety is very important, and we often do prioritize cycling lanes, but how often do we think about the quality of space that these cyclists use and the feeling that comes with it? More than that, it's not just being a cyclist, but also pedestrians experience this.
100%.
You know, the lack of power or rather electricity along our walkways. That element of safety also applies to township development.
100%, man. It's almost like I'm trying to find a way to put it, but they say how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yes.
So the lack of service provision spills over into poorly lit spaces, which is unsafe spaces.
Definitely.
The lack of lanes for cyclists leads to a lack of multiple movement forms,
100%,
movement mode,
exactly.
which means now everyone is crammed towards taking the taxi, taking their car or the Uber, you know?
Exactly.
So it's almost like complacency begets complacency.
100%. And this moves us back to the dominant use of private cars.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this has become what we have been making provision for as planners at the end of the day, is that most people are choosing to use their own private cars because of this element of safety, the lack of infrastructure that's available. And one of the key aspects that he mentioned about open space, Bagiti, I know this is your niche and your passion, is to consider neatening up these velds, these vacant lands. And, you know, what are your thoughts on the fact that you have someone passing through vacant land or these public open spaces and they don't feel safe?
I think, again, that's just, like I said, we have many quick wins as a country that we can get to, like beautification, provision of services. And one of those services is gardening and keeping up of greenfield sites.
Yes.
So just keeping a greenfield site manicured is a simple step. Often those open plots of land aren't owned by government. They have a private developer who bought it and he's sitting on it waiting for MNT or whoever to come buy it from him. But there should be laws coercing these owners to maintain their property and keep it in good form.
That's a very interesting point that you make there, because ultimately, who do we actually look at to be held accountable for these spaces?
Precisely.
And the number of users that pass to and from are left to be vulnerable. And again, we go back to that term of forgotten spaces.
100%.
And as we heard KG's experience about the fact that when he is leaving work late, he has no choice but to pass through these fields. And we assume that when someone is employed, they have a car.
Not in South Africa.
And it is saddening that is the perception and the sort of given bias and stereotype. And I think here we've got a challenge of perception that needs to be taken into account.
100%.
All right, everyone, we're going on to our next conversation that we had, and we got to hear from Aubrey, who actually lives in a more affluent area. So we're going to hear a good contrast from Pretoria North to Centurion, and now we're going to have just a perspective from Lone Hill.
Okay, let's look at it from the top. All right. Okay, so I stay in Fourways, and the extended portion of Fourways in Lone Hill, and I work in Central Sandton, Grayston Drive, which is a 25-minute commute from my residency. The journey typically is a blend of businesses along the strips and main roads, commercial activity. I wouldn't say it's completely polluted, but there is very clear presence of vehicles on the roads, which does contribute to the carbon footprint. But any other emitters of pollution are not really visible during my times of commute, other than the vehicles being on the road. The roads are I would say are in an acceptable condition. The riding quality could be better. There are, I wouldn't say potholes, but there is rutting and corrugations and which affect the riding quality during the commute. Services, amenities, yes, there are definitely quite a few. I would say almost a kilometer apart from each other along the route and trip. How do the places make me feel? So far, I would say it's the traffic, mostly the congestion, that makes the commute somewhat agitating. But the commute back can be a nuisance in that you want to get back home as soon as possible. So the urban network and traffic signals that don't work are a major inconvenience for motorists. It's a nuisance, really. What could change? First, we need less congestion. The riding quality of the roads, of course, is a massive and common touch point amongst motorists, so that needs to change. We need more public safety, road safety, for pedestrians as well. We need services, robots that are running with minimal interruption. And we also need a good blend of traffic modes. The less people we can have on cars, we can reduce the footprint. The less congestion, but those models have been exhausted and are not coming into play because there's not much adoption into them. Carpooling works, but in small schemes and quantities of people. It's not making much of an impact. So all these policies of blended transport modes are great on theory, but in practice, it's a different story to implement. Because people just like the convenience of hopping into their car and getting wherever they want to get. But yeah, if we can reduce the congestion and have different modes of transport, a good transport blend, we would have eradicated most of the problems we're facing. What do I think public life and public spaces? Is this like Confucius kind of a question? Public life and public space. Well, wild card, I'd say public life is an exhibition of life in the public, and public space is a space that which life can exist in that space. Very, very strange question. Yeah, okay. I think I've answered most of your questions. I hope this is helpful. All the very best.
Aubrey had touched on very key points of the quality of road infrastructure and, of course, the oversupply of commercial space in and around the area, which we've come to normalize the amount of commercial space. But do you think commercial space actually counts as a successful public space? Bayiti, what do you think?
It can if the right policies are put in place. Because there's private open space, there's public open space. Private open space is for mostly you, the owner, but it's up to your discretion if you extend this to the public. But there's no ownership there for the community. 'Cause ownership is
Genuinely.
made clear. Often you'll see the big sign saying
Yes.
Menland Skate Park, everything's back to the days,
100%.
So you can't just come there like it's like you own it or you're part of it,
Definitely.
you know. Whereas public open space would really invites that collaboration between everyone because there's some democracy there. you know.
Yes. Also, when there's a name mark to it, which you mentioned now, there's usually a price tag to it,
100%.
a price tag to access these public spaces, and that is a key point, because if we are pushing to have democratic public spaces, this means a sense of equality and fairness for anyone to access, whether you are coming from Fourways or Centurion, even further into Tembisa, you should be able to access public space without a price tag to it. The other point that Aubrey made here was about signage and functionality in the smaller details, such as robots working, directions in terms of our signage for areas that, you know, people enter. These are small details, and which we take note about in the urban space. But how often do you take note or your thoughts on when you are in a more township area of signage, of street addresses, street names? I don't think we've mentioned that in terms of inclusive public space.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think the one quality of people who have often found themselves historically in those spaces is resilience. The hardest thing in a township, in a historically black township, is trying to get around through Waze or through GPS. So what people have done is they use the ingenuity of what's around them and use landmarks as ways of guidance,
Yes.
which should be applauded because it points at the undying resilience of the people. But the fact of the matter is, we need to get some street names in there. Let's get some street signs. Let's get some signage. Let's get some street lights. You know,
Yes.
it shouldn't be when someone asks you, "Where are the best Guinyas Zone 7? Agulapa Stadium." No. It should be straightforward. Or no, Makangu Street and Kosana Avenue.
Yes.
Simple. Yeah.
It's such a wonderful point that you just made now about landmarks. Landmark is also public space. And what has happened is there's this divide, because a landmark now has become a space of tourism more than it has become for the
It's
public.
commercialized.
Exactly. And we can't even use them anymore as pointers for a sense of belonging.
100%.
This has been great discussions, hearing from the public, hearing from your great expertise, Bayiti. I do appreciate your presence here. We've received fantastic insights, and as we wrap up our discussion, it's clear that public space has a very significant impact on our people and how do they use the city itself and commute to and from work. By addressing these challenges that they've faced and having an input from the public and people itself, implementing inclusive development is very, very important for us to take note of. And the only way we can do this is with hearing from the people. As we wrap up today, I want to thank you again for making the time to hear us, making the time to provide your input to all of us and getting the people's perspective. Stay tuned for more of the exciting episodes in which we're going to wrap up the key lessons we've gathered from the discussions we've had today.